A lot of players getting hyped up because of their preseason performance, but whose hype is real and who isn't? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. Appreciate you all so very much. Those of you who've been around all summer, sticking with me throughout the season, you guys are the backbone of this show, of this network as a whole. And if you're new here, I love you as well. Hello and welcome. My name is Luke. I'll be your host, and you can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings, whether it is an audio listening app like SiriusXM. And by the way, if you search up the Minnesota Vikings on SiriusXM, you can find live broadcasts of any Vikings game, including this Saturday's tilt against the Philadelphia Eagles. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Today on the show, it's hype check, all right? Hype check. I came out of the Cleveland Browns preseason game pretty juiced up about a few players. And now that I've had a chance to go back and look at the tape and see just how I felt, I wanted to check in on those sort of hype narratives. The big one is Lewis Cine. Is Lewis Cine as hyped up as he should be? Is Saturday's game a real indication of an improvement? Has he cracked the code? Has he figured it out? Or was it a tip drill interception and an unblocked sack, and maybe the box score is lying to us a little bit? And I wanted to ask the same questions about Levi Drake Rodriguez, who's getting all kinds of hype, and Bo Richter, who's been sort of a darling of the preseason as well. But let's start with Lewis Cine. I'm sorry, everyone. I don't want to do this to you, but it's not as good as it looks. I wish there were a way that I could homer this because I don't want to believe it, but it's more important to me to tell you what I believe to be true than it is what I believe that you want to hear. So here's the thing about the game that Lewis Cine had. A little fake. The interception, tip drill interception. And the way I feel about these is, tips and overthrows, right? We got to have those. The tip drill part of it is something that teams practice and drill. And I think that if you have to drill it, we can call it a skill. So good job, you did it. It's a skill most defenders have. It's not something that particularly separates you, but it's like not biting on a hard count, right? You don't get the most roses in the world, but good job. But what on that play, if you watch the tape, and I have a Patreon video coming out about Lewis Cine at some point today, probably, if not tomorrow, that I will show you this play. But on that play, Cine doesn't get enough width on his too high drop. It's cover two man is the coverage in that one. And in cover two man, when you're on the boundary side, that's the shorter side of the field. The ball is on the hash, so between that hash and the sideline, you want to essentially midpoint your area of the field. You want to be essentially right in the middle of it. And when you're on the boundary side, that puts you about at the bottom of the numbers on the field. And he's on the wrong side of the numbers. So he didn't get enough width on that drop. He got plenty of depth, but not enough width. That allows the receiver who's running a go route down the sideline a lot more space to work with to beat his corner. And his corner, who is Nahshon Wright, by the way, tries to jam him, which when you're in two-man, you can absolutely get away with a jam because if you get beat over the top, you've got a safety there. But if that safety doesn't place himself well enough, there's actually a really good explosive throw available there to the quarterback. I think that route was last in the progression for the Browns, so it's never going to get thrown. But as coverage, as defense, that's not exactly, that's lucking out, right? Thank goodness that it wasn't there and that instead Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I think it was, right, forced a ball into a covered receiver that, couldn't bring it in and it tipped up and we got the interception. So I like the discipline of making the intercepted play, right? If it falls within your range, you got to come down with that thing. But which thing is going to happen more often. A tip that falls into your lap or go routes on the sideline. Which problem is going to come up again? There are a lot of things that showed up in Cine's game that I feel that way about, where they're not statistically, like they're not statistics. They're not things that happen. They're not yards given up in coverage, but they're habits that will turn into those statistics if they continue. If you ever have to put this guy on the field and actually put him at safety. Imprecision with where he parks himself is a theme here. Hesitation is a theme here. There are a couple of plays where he goes in very confidently and makes a great play. The hit on Tyler Huntley might be his best play of the day. At least it was his flashiest. Didn't count because of a holding penalty on someone else. Which, by the way, if you watch the game and you were like, why did that hit get flagged? It was so clean. It didn't get flagged. That was a penalty on a different Viking. He got a defensive holding and so it didn't count, but the hit sure does. You still have the bruise when you wake up, right? And it was a very good, clean hit because he came in confidently, right? Full running start, confident hit, let your habits take over. That's why you drill it. Because when the speed is ramped up as much as it does in an in-game situation, even in a preseason game where things are more vanilla, what you drill in that muscle memory takes over. Of course it does, right? So that's a great play. You have a blitz earlier in that game where he's blitzing from depth. I think it maybe was supposed to be a creeper because they ran the same thing, but with him as a creeper later in the game. And he sort of starts to creep, but he's like late about it. So that might be an issue, but I can't say for sure. A creeper is a pressure where Lewis Cine or a safety or whoever creeps up to the line before the blitz. Creeper. So it might be, it kind of looks like it was supposed to be a creeper or like he was starting to creep up to the line, but I don't know the coaching point there. So, call that a wash, but when he actually gets going downhill, he hesitates and then he's a beat late and the play goes off. You can't hesitate when you're a blitzer. You are especially Cine, who was the unblocked player on that protection. It was the exact same situation as the sack Lewis Cine got later, where he was an unblocked player. In that first one, he hesitates. I don't really understand why there's anything to hesitate about. If you're a blitzer, you go. In Flores' defense, he sent 6 on that play. You have 5 guys in zone coverage behind it. 5 guys in zone coverage is going to get ripped apart, and it's all about time. So when you hesitate, you force those zones to hold for that split second longer, and that split second was all it took. He did get a hit on the quarterback, but the ball got off, and it turned out to be a really big throw into a part of that zone of that defense that was uncovered because we were sending so many guys. You can't hesitate. You're the clock. So I did like that when they called it later in the game, he didn't hesitate. That's growth. We like to see that growth. But it's a far cry from, whoa, he balled out, he was the player of the game. Far cry to go from that to, well, he messed up, but at least he learned from it. There are a lot of other issues that I had with his game. The hesitation is a big one. The kind of placement is a big one. The other big one is just there were a lot of times where Lewis Cine is just too small. You just had a lot of moments where him either trying to tackle a tight end and the tight end pulls him over and, you can get 3-4 more yards just falling forward. There was the rushing touchdown on the first play, the first drive that the Browns scored on, where he was in the hole, he was in the alley, and he had every chance to light up that running back, and you might as well throw a paper airplane at him. There just wasn't enough bulk to Lewis Cine to make that happen. And that's tough because that's not a very solvable problem, right? Are you placing yourself correctly in coverage? Well, we can watch tape. We can correct that. We can work on that. Are you big enough to make these tackles, even though you're coming in and actually hitting with good leverage and, popping them with the shoulder pads and playing aggressively? Okay, no, right? Like we would have to start talking about like a real change to the composition of Lewis Cine's body, which takes away the speed you drafted him for and just totally turns him into a different kind of player that's not his game at all. And so you'd be just like building from the ground up again. So what he did in the game, while productive, and he had some moments of good plays, the subtleties and the details were not up to par for me. And so I think I'm kind of reverting back to, how do we get this guy on the 53-man roster? Cutting him costs you, I think, $2 million extra. Trading him away saves you the money. So I think we're going back to, does he get traded at cut down day to somebody who had a high draft grade on him and thinks that they can fix him? That's what you got to do. Or maybe I'm wrong, right? There's plenty of hype coming out of the Vikings building. Maybe they saw that game and he was productive enough and he finally showed a little bit of aggression, and now suddenly the coaches have woken up and said, hey, maybe we can actually, resume this project and do something out of this guy that we had kind of written off. Maybe that's the case. And they go that way, and hey, I'm going to be for that, right? I'm all for patience and understanding that development is a process. As it stands right now, though, I don't want him on the field, bar none. I don't want him on special teams. Maybe he'll do that, but as a safety, that is not a trustworthy package. What is a trustworthy package is Levi Drake Rodriguez. Ho, baby. Oh, baby. Also a Patreon video that I did, and I will talk about some of the themes of that one next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now at FanDuel, we got something a little bit different for you. If you are any FanDuel customer, new or veteran FanDueler, you can get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you have to do is bet $5 on anything, whether it is Vikings over under 7.5 wins. Right now, the over is as cheap as an over will ever get on FanDuel. So if you believe in the Vikings to win 8 or more games, you can get some pretty good odds there. Whether it is any other regular season future, home run props in baseball, whatever you can find, WNBA back in form, you can put down $5 on whatever you want and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and hey, you can cancel anytime, so don't worry about it. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Vinny Iyer will get you right and ready for your upcoming fantasy draft. Moving on here, I want to talk about Levi Drake Rodriguez. As negative as I felt about Lewis Cine, there was a lot that Levi Drake Rodriguez did that I just did not see on the live watch. And holy Moses, this cat was humming. Obviously, I need to temper, there's a part of me that's be responsible. It was just a preseason game, right? You're going up against 2s and 3s. And then there's another part of me that's F it, all in. 7th round rookie, draft pick, playing good. Let's go. I'm his biggest fan now. If there are no fans of Levi Drake Rodriguez, I am dead. So let me, I guess, explain what I saw that excited me so much. And then you can decide for yourself whether that's about strength of competition or not. But I don't really think it is. Because one of the things that I think is a learned skill and something that is part of tape watching in general that I've tried my best to get better at over time and be aware of is the difference between my guy making a good play and their guy making a bad play, and trying to determine, which is which. And once you feel like you've done that, once you have something that says, okay, he got through, but that's because, the guard effed up. Once you have that, it doesn't really matter if that guard is known reputably as a good player or not. Because if you look at that play and say, well, yeah, but he made a bad play here, and therefore I'm not going to give too many roses to a guy that took advantage of it. We like to punish mistakes, but we're tempering it and all that. Now you can apply that context and do it on a play-by-play basis, and that way you don't have to make these sort of grander, sort of imprecise adjustments because, that's a second team player. Okay, yeah, but he played really great on this one. So the fact that Levi Drake Rodriguez defeated what was a pretty good play, we can be happy about that. So I really liked what Levi Drake Rodriguez did. Not who he was going up against and what they did or whatever. Like, I don't care about that. I like what he did. And what he did, to be more specific and precise about that, a lot of what I liked about him came from his arms and his hands. Really good use of his hands. Hand placement was very accurate. Typically what you want is one kind of on the sternum and then one like on the shoulder pad, so you're attacking half the man. If you've got two hands kind of right in the middle, you want those hands inside. If you got two hands up and on the outside on the shoulder pads, and you just missed. But if you got two hands on kind of like on the pecs, that you're taking on the whole guy. On O-line, you want that. O-line wants to be head up because O-line wants to use their whole body to stop you. And if you got your whole body on my whole body, we fight to a draw. If it's a stalemate, O-line wins. D-line, a stalemate's a loss. So D-line wants to attack half the man. You get one on your one hand on your on the middle and one on that shoulder. And now you're only attacking half of him. That's just not going to be strong as all of him. And you can get through, right? O-line can get through you too because they're attacking half of you, but that's not very useful for an O-line. That's why attacking half the man's thing. Does a good job of that, and a really good job with just leverage and getting long once he has that hand on your shoulder pad. Getting long and standing you up. That's just being stronger than the guy across from you, and that's the part where we go, okay, but that's a second teamer. How strong is that guy even on a good rep? But getting that leverage advantage, at a certain point, I don't care how strong you are. If you lose your leverage, if your back is stood straight up, you just aren't going to be able to beat a guy, even if you've got a 50-pound advantage on him. So that kind of thing translates into a real game. Very quick with his shedding. A move he really likes to utilize is basically shocking the pads and getting a guy stood up to ruin his leverage and then yanking him all the way back down. I call it a snatch shed because it kind of evokes like a snatch and trap, which is something that O-line will do that's very similar, where you kind of yank him down by the pads and try to get him off balance. And it sort of looks like that. There are a lot of different words for that, and some people just call it like standard, just a shed. Some people have other terms or whatever, but you understand what I mean, right? Like down, you basically want to snatch that guy down and away from whatever gap you're trying to get into. And if you've shocked his pads, the thing is, if he has no leverage, you have all the control in the world over him. So you can move him into a gap. You can walk him back into the running back. You can snatch down and away, shed him, and now you've penetrated and you're in the backfield and you're making a run stop. You can do whatever it is that you want, and there's really not a lot that guy can do to you anymore. Once he's lost that leverage battle and he's been stood up. Once the spine angle has been ruined, spine angle is a big one. Once the spine angle has been ruined, you are pretty much dead to rights. And there are a lot of the best Levi Drake Rodriguez reps started like that. Started getting somebody's spine angle ruined, getting him dead to rights, and then having eyes on the ball carrier, get into the gap and go make the tackle. You know, no gain, 2 yards, 3 yards, tackle for a loss. That's how you get those. That's how you stack those up. And then when it was time to use his arms, he was very quick about it, very efficient about it, and that can be a really good way to do it. Though a couple of things about him that I didn't love, the plans that he used in pass rush, I think were flawed. And that, like, pass rush plans could be, I could talk for an hour and a half about those and still not say everything that you have to like think about when you're evaluating all that. But in general, if you're trying to evaluate somebody's pass rush plan, the first thing you have to do is figure out what gaps he has access to. If this is a 4-man rush and you've got 2 edges doing contain, for example, a lot of times, so that takes away both C gaps, right? So now you've got 2 B gaps, 2 A gaps. So a lot of times, the defensive line, you're not just going to have the 2 D tackles, let's say like classic 4-3 front, right? Just to keep it simple. So you've got 2 D tackles left. The edges are doing their thing, trying to win around the edge. 2 D tackles, 1 on each guard. And then what you're not going to do is have them say, well, you could go A gap or go B gap and give them both what's called a 2-way go. Probably not going to do that because the center can help one, and then, you know, you can, it gives the offense too much flexibility. What you want, what I think you would often do is you just let one gap be completely uncovered because this isn't the run, right? This is pass. So you would have, you would slash them maybe, or you would, you come up with different ways. Every pass rush, and especially once you start working twists into there and just these plans, every pass rush has an assignment for each player on which gaps they have access to. And very often you are setting up one player with the two-way go. You want one player who can pick if he can go to the left gap or the right gap, and that player can use it. And often, that's going to be your best player. He's the one getting Daniil Hunter got all the two-way goes last year, and everybody else is just setting up for him. That's a lot of the reason why D tackles don't get production in the pass game, because they don't get the two-way goes. You go in this gap, please. Force the guard to do what you want him to do, right? If we've got this D tackle going into the B gap, the guard has to cover him. And now we've opened up the A gap for a stunting lineman or for a blitzer or for the other D tackle or whoever's in there. It's all going to be part of the grander plan. So a lot of times as a D tackle, you are sacrificial. And if you are sacrificial, you're not going to get the stats, but we still get to see if you win and properly execute your job. Maybe my favorite play of Levi Drake Rodriguez's day came on a crash on a stunt where he wasn't supposed to get the sack and he didn't. He actually almost did, just because it caused a scramble situation that kind of funneled back into him. But he crashed a guy so hard that he blew up a guy so hard he ended up on the ground, and he ended up taking the other guy next to him to the ground as well. I think another guy actually got his ankle rolled up and got hurt. But like that's the amount of violence. That's beautiful. That dirty work, that willingness to do the dirty work is beautiful. So the least responsible part of me is super all in. The more responsible part of me is getting there, okay? Is getting there. But I think in terms of making the team, I think LDR is of all of the sort of backup D linemen that are all jockeying for this position, I think LDR has very much carved out a place for himself on the 53 and on active on game days and in the rotation. A couple of other people, I guess I'll kind of rapid fire through a few more that, did the hype match or is the narrative correct on them, maybe is the answer. And I go back and forth on some of these guys, so that'll be next. Thank you to Gametime, the sponsor of today's episode. Gametime is the best place to find last-minute tickets. They have a 50% off Labor Day offer for Diamondbacks Dodgers tickets if you are in that area. The game on Labor Day, it is an exclusive on Gametime, limited availability and supply, so get your tickets while they last. And there are all kinds of deals and interesting things going on at Gametime all the time. So check back often, especially if you're getting tickets for like an upcoming NFL game, right? Like if you're trying to buy tickets for the home opener, well, you got a few weeks, right? You can buy last minute on Gametime, and you can save up to 60% buying last minute on Gametime because the market gets so wonky last minute. But if you're trying to get ahead of things, check the prices, wait for tomorrow, check the prices, wait for tomorrow. You'll probably find a deal or something if you're patient enough that you really, really like. Some kind of zone deal where you get to pick the section and Gametime picks the row for you so they can help search out the best deal, or exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals and all kinds of stuff just like this Labor Day thing. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Moving on here, a few other undrafted players, unheralded players, maybe, because they're not all UDFA rookies, that have flashed in the preseason, but is it real? Or have, narratives about them, but are they real? And what I wanted to start with was Jaquelin Roy. Jaquelin Roy, and I sort of erroneously was like, man, Jaquelin Roy's been kind of quiet. I did not realize that he just has not been on the field. He's just not playing in the same way. Like he'll play like the first 2 drives and then go off the field, which tells me that the Vikings are probably pretty happy with him and probably pretty willing to roster him. And of course, he's not making a lot of waves in the preseason. He's not doing anything. Neither is Theo Jackson because he's only playing, 6 reps a game and probably won't play in the game against the Eagles. We're probably not going to see like a lot of the roster locks against the Eagles. We'll see very few of them. And it'll be a lot more about the bubble players and, the bottom of the roster guys. We're going to see a lot of Sammis Reyes, maybe not so much Nick Muse. But for Jaquelin Roy, the one time he did stand out to me against Cleveland was a very good play, a very good, again, shock the pads up and then a club and shed. and got in for, I believe he got in for the TFL. So, you're still at least seeing something positive there. And then it's like, okay, good job. And then you go back on the bench and rest. So I see the rotation there. Probably he is just backup Harrison Phillips. And then if you have Levi Drake Rodriguez, like backup Bullard or backup Tillery, kind of and then there's your 5D tackles. I could see that being the case. That would shoulder out guys like Taki Taimani, guys like Jonah Williams, who I don't think has done as much, but has also not really played as much. Taki Taimani is a guy that had a lot of hype. I could see them looking at his game. His game was really good. It was true. Maybe he's the next guy to talk about. I noticed him live. I don't think you could not notice him in the live watch. Go and look at the tape. It confirms itself. It's just, I'm just still worried that he's a little bit too buried on the depth chart. And it's a more of a like, okay, so you lock down the practice squad slot and let's keep developing. But sometimes I've said that about people and then they do just like make it. Like I think I said that about Tashawn Bauer the year he made it. I was like, yeah, but he's an undrafted rookie. Is he really going to? Oh yeah, okay, he made it. Or Brandon Dillon the year he made it, the Marion Flash. And it was like, well, yeah, he's been exciting, but they're not going to roster Brandon Dillon. And then they do. So I've definitely made that mistake before. So be aware of that like they could just do it anyways and then be happy. One of the narratives that I guess that I've been most wrong about has been Brian Asamoah. Brian Asamoah has struggled. He's had a few plays where he gets in there, and so you watch on TV and you see him, going and making the tackle a bunch. You go, wow, maybe he's flying around the field. But coverage-wise, you've had some struggles. And the problem is, and this is a me problem, to diagnose those and to truly blame them on Asamoah, you have to make some guesses about the coverage. So I admit that I could be super wrong about that. I also don't know if, like, Dallas Gant has had a lot of ups and a lot of downs, and I don't know if that makes the team. So you might just have him penciled into a roster spot, and there's not a lot that he does. He just has to not be an abject catastrophe. But there have been struggles, and I don't know if he is sort of come out and played the way that I thought he was playing in the 2022 preseason, or in the 2023 preseason, where I was so excited about him before Ivan Pace kind of usurped him and took all his reps away by being even better. This is not the instinctual Asamoah that I saw. And maybe I just didn't know what I was looking at. Totally possible. And maybe I still don't. But there's sort of similar issues to Cine where it's like, especially in coverage, like placing yourself and then just kind of getting caught out and, ruining your angle or just like not being too small, right? So I could see Kamu Grugier-Hill usurping him on the depth chart. And then maybe a couple of controversial ones, Bo Richter and Andre Carter. I've seen very up and down things on Andre Carter. I think that, tell me, if you're watching on YouTube, tell me what you think of Andre Carter's preseason so far. Before you listen any further to get my opinion, like, tell me what you think. Because I don't know where the cognoscenti is, but I think it's reasonable that there's a mix of opinions because it depends on like which plays you paid attention to him on. Because if you go watch like the right 3 or 4 plays or the wrong 3 or 4 plays and get totally different opinions. He's been very up and down. And then I would say the same thing about Bo Richter. This is the one people y'all aren't going to like this one. Bo Richter, I don't know if he has played consistently enough to be like on the 53-man roster over somebody like Jihad Ward. At this juncture, I would slam Jihad Ward over Bo Richter and say, good job, Richter. You're on the practice. We want to keep you in the house. Let's put you on the practice squad and develop you a little bit, see what you can do next year. But I don't think that he's quite played well enough for me to feel comfortable with him on a 53-man roster. And the interesting thing is that, you never worry about losing those kinds of guys to waivers because, they haven't played well enough to get on a 53-man roster. If he's not good enough for mine, why would he be good enough for someone else's? But somebody else with a lot of depth issues might go take him, and then I guess you're fine with that because you kept the guy you'd rather keep, right? That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. I'm sure I've made plenty of you mad. Seethe about it, and I'll see you tomorrow. And as always, Skull.